Chapter 3092 begins with Matriarch Farrell explaining that she had her assistant investigate a matter involving Shiloh. Photographic evidence of Shiloh's actions has come to light, but Matriarch Farrell, in an attempt to shield her daughter Catherine from the harsh reality, discourages her from looking at the photos. Catherine, although almost 30 years old and no stranger to the harshness of life, still chooses to focus on mundane things like finishing her snacks rather than confronting the disturbing truth. She speculates that Shiloh may have deliberately allowed herself to be photographed, knowing that Matriarch Farrell would investigate her. This suggests a calculated act of rebellion or revenge on Shiloh's part. Matriarch Farrell is deeply disturbed by Shiloh's betrayal. For over 2 decades, she had loved and raised Shiloh as her own daughter, never suspecting that Shiloh was not biologically hers. Despite sensing that Shiloh was different from her, she had always attributed Shiloh's lack of ability and disappointing behavior to her husband's genes. She had poured all her love and effort into raising her, only to find out that she was not her real daughter. This realization, coupled with Shiloh's recent betrayal, fills her with regret and bitterness. The matriarch admits that she should have expelled Shiloh from the Farrell family as soon as she discovered the truth. She now views her decision to keep Shiloh in the family as a grave mistake. Despite her attempts to justify her past actions by reminding herself that she had raised Shiloh for over 20 years, she cannot shake the feeling of betrayal. She is deeply angry and disappointed in both Shiloh and her husband. Her relationship with her husband, while lacking deep affection, had been built on the necessity of marriage and the duty to produce heirs. Now, decades into their marriage, she finds herself betrayed by both her adopted daughter and her husband, and she is overwhelmed with anger. Throughout this chapter, the complex emotions Matriarch Farrell harbors toward her family are evident. While she feels justified in her anger and disappointment towards Shiloh and her husband, she also questions whether her harshness toward Catherine over the past few years has been fair. She acknowledges that she has been overly critical of her biological daughter, but Catherine, in a show of understanding, does not hold this against her mother. Catherine understands that her mother's harshness was intended to prepare her for life's challenges and to shape her into a strong, capable woman. This shared understanding between mother and daughter brings Matriarch Farrell a sense of relief, knowing that Catherine does not resent her for the tough love she had shown. As the conversation progresses, Matriarch Farrell's anguish becomes more apparent. Despite Catherine's attempts to comfort her and downplay the situation, Matriarch Farrell cannot simply brush off the emotional weight of the betrayal she feels. Catherine tries to keep her mother's focus on her own well being, urging her not to let irrelevant people affect her so deeply. But for Matriarch Farrell, the betrayal cuts too deeply to be easily dismissed. Shiloh was once the daughter she adored and invested so much in, while her son, her biological son, is now implicated in a scandal that involves her husband's infidelity. These emotional wounds are impossible to ignore, and the betrayal from her husband, whom she married out of duty rather than love, is an insult she struggles to bear after so many years of commitment. She acknowledges that while she never had much affection for her husband, the years of marriage and the shared experience of raising children together have created a bond that cannot be easily severed. The discovery of his affair, particularly with Shiloh, brings a flood of complicated emotions, including anger and sadness. Although she once regarded her marriage as a necessity for producing heirs, the thought of her husband's infidelity after decades of life together, stings deeply. The weight of betrayal from both her adopted daughter and her husband leaves her feeling overwhelmed, and she cannot help but be affected by the emotional toll it takes on her. In the end, Matriarch Farrell's anguish is evident as she wrestles with feelings of betrayal from the people closest to her. Despite the outward show of strength and control she maintains, the cracks in her emotional armor are visible, revealing a woman struggling to come to terms with the fragility of familial bonds. Her relationship with Catherine, while showing signs of reconciliation, does little to soothe the pain of betrayal she feels from Shiloh and her husband.